Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Today, we've received apologies from Mr. O'Shea and Mr. Smith is subbing for him. Before we can begin, can I please remind everyone to turn off their microphones when they wish to speak or are invited to speak. As this is the first meeting of the council term, it would be useful for all members and officers to introduce themselves. So I'll start. So I'm Deborah Taylor, Leader of the Opposition and the County Councillor for the Bradgate Division. Michael?
Michael Mullaney, County Councillor for Hinckley de Montfort and was formerly the Chair of the Scrutiny Commission.
It's Mr. King, Member for Gartree. Thank you.
James Poland, Syston Foss.
Craig Smith, Colville North.
Wayne Durrani from Bodby.
Good morning, Dan Harrison, Leader of Leicester County Council.
Simon Galton, County Councillor for Law Division.
Declan Keegan, Director of Corporate Resources.
Simone Hines, Assistant Director of Finance.
I'm Kim Robinson, Reform UK County Councillor for Broadston.
Harry Knight, County Councillor for Melton West.
Good morning, Linda Danks, County Councillor for Roseley and Mount Sorrel.
John Bloxham, Blaby and Glenparva.
Hi, I'm Andrew Innes. I'm Melton East.
Good morning, Bill Piper from Blocknestley.
Good morning, Fiona McMillan. I'm Head of Law and the Council's Statutory Scrutiny Officer.
Joanne Toomey, Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you. So we'll move on. So item 1, appointment of chairman. The Commission is asked to know that I've been appointed chairman of the Scrutiny Commission in accordance with Article 6.05 of the County Council's Constitution. On to item 2. So we have the appointment of the vice chairman. Can I ask for nominations from the floor, please? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Mr. Mullaney as obviously a previous Scrutiny Commission experience. I think he'd be able to support you best. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for that, Mr. Poland?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. Serve with Michael, and I think he'd be a good choice.
Any other nominations, Mr. Innes? Microphone.
John Bloxham, please. I'd like to nominate John for a position of vice.
Do you have a seconder?
I'm more than happy to second Dr. Bloxham.
Thank you. So we've had more than one. We'll go to a secret ballot. So we'll just let Dem Services sort that out. Okay, they've all voted and it's a unanimous vote for Mr Maloney, so congratulations, I'm now the Vice Chairman. Okay, we move on to item 3, the minutes. So I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of March 2025 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. All agreed? Thank you. On to item 4, question time. I've received a question from a member of the public, Mr Stairs. The question and the responses have been circulated to members of the committee prior to the start of the meeting and will be taken as read. This has also been published on the council website for public information. I'd like to remind members there is no discussion to be held on this. Mr Stairs has advised that he has a supplementary question to ask, and so he's joined us online. So welcome, Mr Stairs. So before proceeding, can I just remind you that your supplementary question should be to clarify the reply you've been given and should not raise any issues. Would you like to ask your supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the reply I've already had. I wondered if I could just clarify, based on the last part of the answer there, does that mean, should I interpret that as meaning so far there hasn't been a proposal to bring in outside auditors? I think that's how to interpret the answer. So I wonder if you could clarify that, please.
Thank you. Declan, are you able to clarify?
Yeah, we haven't had any approach at all.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you you're very welcome to stay. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item 5, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7. I've not received any questions. And item 6, urgent items. There are no urgent items today. So on to item 7, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any interest they wish to declare? No? Okay, item 8, declarations of the party whip in accordance with the overview scrutiny procedure 16. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? Okay, we'll move on to item 9, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 36. I've not received any petitions. So we'll move on to item 10, the provisional revenue capital outturn for 2024-2025. So members will be aware that following circulation of the agenda, a supplementary report was received with the committee last Friday and published on the council's website. Members will have also been sent a briefing note on bank risk sharing investments for information, and a copy of this has been made available for you today. Simone Hines, Assistant Director of Corporate Resources, will take us through the report along with Declan Keegan, the Director. We've also asked the leader, Mr Harrison, with us today, so welcome to Mr Harrison. Simone, if you'd like to start your report.
Thank you. I'll just introduce the report briefly and just pull out some of the key highlights really, and then also we're happy to take questions afterwards. So the report presents the council's outturn position for the 24-25 financial year, and it includes a summary of the revenue and the capital budgets for the last 12 months. It shows that for revenue, the council underspent by 8.8 million. Compared to the budget that was set for the year. That's about 1.5% of the net revenue budget for the year, just to put that into context. You do have a summary of the overall outturn position and the main variances at the appendices. So appendices at A and B, you'll find a lot more detail. But just in terms of the main reasons for that underspend, one of the most significant reasons is in adult social care, as you'll see in the appendices. And we have seen reduced demand for adult social care services through the year compared to the budget assumptions that we made. And that's largely due to some proactive work by the adult social care department to really try and manage the demand coming in a slightly different way. So we've seen that the number of service users has not increased as much as it had done in previous years. So we made some assumptions about what we thought the increase in demand would be, and it hasn't quite reached the trends that we expected. And you'll also see from the report that the average cost of the individuals' care packages has also reduced as well compared to the budget. We've also seen a reduced impact of inflation across the year, again, compared to the budget that we originally set. And that also has a particular impact on adult social care because the fees that we pay to providers are linked to inflation. And then because interest rates have remained higher for longer over the year, we've had some additional investment income. And we've also had a number of spend controls that have been in place throughout the year, actually, which has led to some underspends and also some particular salary savings as well. I think partly due to those financial controls, but also partly because we have had some difficulty in recruiting during the year, particularly in some professional technical roles where we have struggled to recruit to vacancies. That that does bring some salary savings, but also does put some pressure on services sometimes as well. So can be pros and cons from having salary savings. You'll see from the report, though, that some of those underspends have been offset by an overspend in the Children's Services Department, and that is because not so much because of increased demand overall, but increased demand for more costly, complex care. So you'll see from the report that the number of children that we have in residential placements is higher than it was previously and higher than the budgeted assumption. And it's residential placements that do cost the council the most. So that's the main reason for that overspend in children's. The report then proposes to Cabinet that underspend is contributed to the transformation reserve, and that is to help support the identification of savings in future years. So we do have quite a large gap across the MTFS. So by 28-29, the council, on current assumptions, needs to find additional savings or income in the region of £90 million. So we do need to identify and deliver some additional savings fairly quickly, particularly because I think it's about 40 million of that gap falls in 26-27. So there's quite limited time to identify those savings. And because of that, we feel that some additional capacity and some outside expertise is going to be useful to help us identify those savings. So earmarking that underspend to some transformation resource is going to help us to do that. And then just turning to the capital programme briefly, which is also covered in the report, there's an underspend against budget for the year of 34 million, but that is largely in relation to rephasing of spend. So it's a rephasing of programmes over the year rather than it's not that any particular projects have underspent by that much. It's more that it's the timing of spend across financial years that has changed. So that underspend will be carried forward to future years to continue the schemes that are in the programme, just a slightly different payment profile, really. The capital programme does, though, have a similar funding challenge to revenue, which is important to note. And over the MTFS period, there is a funding gap on capital of around 80 million. So we will either need to look at prioritising the capital projects further or potentially incurring more borrowing to fund those projects, which will lead to some revenue costs. So that MTFS gap, both capital and revenue, actually does mean it's even more important that the council's got a prudent level of reserves that it holds. And you can see from the report at I think it's paragraph 86, you can see the current level of reserves that the council holds, and you have got that assurance that we have got a reasonable level of reserve to support the MTFS in future years. What is particularly important, and one of the council's aims, is to make sure that one of the risk reserves, which is the budget equalisation reserve, has sufficient cover in there for the first 2 years of the MTFS gap, which at the moment it does. And that's just in case future savings take some time to deliver. There are also particular uncertainties this year around the spending review, which was due this week, actually, on Wednesday, and funding reform. And those two unknowns at the moment may create some further financial challenge for the council. So we may need to respond quite quickly once we get some more information on those issues. So just in summary, before we move to any questions, the underspend for 24-25 has been achieved through some very strong financial control and financial management, and also a particular focus on managing that social care demand, because it does form such a large part of the council spend. But looking ahead, we have got some real challenges in the MTFS, so that underspend will at least help us to put us in a good position to identify some further savings to make sure we can close that gap. That's all I was going to say, but obviously happy to take questions.
Declan, was there anything you needed to add at the moment?
No, not at this stage.
Okay. Mr. Harrison? Okay, open up for members for comments and questions. Mr. Bloxham?
Thanks for that. Just a general one, first of all, the MTFS. I mean, do the officers have any ideas how we can fix that shortfall? That, you know, suggestions that you've had in the past maybe that haven't been accepted, or for whatever reason, or is it going to be entirely up to Cabinet to be coming up with the ideas?
We've already got a number of savings under development that aren't currently factored into the MTFS yet, because we haven't made enough progress on on implementing them or understanding implications. But the corporate management team are working on those savings and development and working to identify any other opportunities. And there are a number of further opportunities that we are looking at and where we want to use that transformation reserve to explore further. So we've got a number of areas that we're looking at, but they're not quite yet progressed enough to put into the MTFS, but it's those conversations between CMT and Cabinet that will agree how we move those forward and identify any other options. And there is that sort of collective responsibility really between the corporate management team and Cabinet to identify and agree those savings.
Just add really briefly, I mean, it's kind of just the magnitude of the gap, which isn't that dissimilar to other sort of councils around the country in sort of a similar funding position. There's not going to be any sort of silver bullet that's just going to sort of resolve this on its own. So it is going to be sort of, I suppose, Simone describes kind of a whole range of different sort of savings type initiatives. But it's also ultimately going to end up things like just making sure we kind of constrain capital costs so that we're not sort of adding additional burden to ourselves. Also things like council tax has always also been sort of a significant part of the sort of financial strategy as well. And ultimately kind of, although it's hard to sort of gauge the success, lobbying of government has been sort of a feature across the sector as well. And it's undoubtedly over the last few years, kind of government has sort of always said you're not going to get any more and given a little bit extra. Now you can't rely on that, but I'm sort of more making the point that it's going to be just sort of a range of kind of like different factors that are going to sort of help to close the gap, but it's going to be hard work over the next 4 years to do it.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, Simone. I don't know if you're actually going to be able to answer this, but obviously with the spending, the uncertainty around the spending review this Wednesday, in my experience, certainly over the last 4 years, government have always sort of given with one hand and taken back with both. The likelihood that may happen again, do we have a plethora of different ideas that we can sort of bridge that gap that's likely to happen? I know it's unpublished at the minute, but we have to look at it pragmatically. It is likely that we're not going to be in a strong as position as what we are today. Thank you.
So in terms of the potential outcome of the spending review, I think we've seen from the previous, so the settlement that we had at Christmas this year, that there is a direction of travel more towards, in terms of the current funding formula, and focusing more on deprivation. So if anything, we expect the outcome of the funding reform not to be positive for the county. What I guess the big unknown though is what the government spending priorities will be. We know there is very little headroom in terms of national finances, and if the government continue to protect certain services such as health and education, there will be even less funding available for local government, and any of the spending cuts that the Chancellor may need to bring in to meet her fiscal rules may need to fall disproportionately on local government. We may get some indication on Wednesday in terms of those national priorities and the national spending totals. I don't think we'll get any clear indication about the impact for Leicestershire until well into the autumn, and possibly even close to Christmas when we'll get the final settlement, which is why, as Declan mentioned, it is about, over the next few months, the council looking at all potential opportunities. We've got a range of savings and development that we're already looking at, but we will need to look at kind of all of the tools, I guess, that we've got, both service changes, but also looking at how we can generate income as well. But it is going to be a very tricky year, I think, just with the uncertainty over reform and the spending review, and we may need to react quite quickly once we have a bit more information.
Mr. King?
Yeah, thank you, Simone. A couple of things I wanted to ask you about, and again, I'm not entirely sure whether you'll be able to answer this. Chair, just want to make the point, it's disappointing that the lead member isn't present this morning to deal with the questions, but perhaps the leader can answer these if they're too political for you. So the first question is, last week the government released the response to the LGR proposals, and in that there is a section saying that going forward, the LGR for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, whatever that happens to be, will have to include some work of how to make the city council financially viable. Well, it doesn't take a genius to work out the only way you can do that is to give some of the council tax base away from the county area council tax and business rates base to the city council. But of course, then whatever's left, whether it's a 1 unitary or whether it's a 2 unitaries or 3, then clearly becomes less financially viable itself. And I'm just wondering, at what point are we going to understand that? I know you can't give me an answer at the moment, but it is concerning because during the course of the MTFS, this is going to happen. So what happens? I mean, there's a lot. I know you can't answer this, but I'm just saying that's another added factor that you haven't even mentioned yet about the impact of LGR and whatever the outcome's going to be, and what happens to any debts or extraneous situation that we have. Is the government going to cover those costs off, or are they going to say the debts go with whoever ends up being the outcome of the new authority? That's point number one. Second point is that in a recent television interview, I think he's not the chairman anymore of Reform UK, but Mr. Youssef made some comments that he believed. Oh, he's back. All right, okay. He made some comments that we've all heard of this Doge thing, whatever that means. And the reason I raise it is that in his television interview, which is in the public domain, with I think it was Spectator Television, he made some rather, amongst the the long-winded rhetoric that he had, he did make some comments about that he thought, and I assume therefore the Reform members on this council think, because that seems to be the way they do things, that they believe that the efficiencies can be made in local government by sorting out procurement and things like that. I just really wanted to get your take on Leicestershire County's procurement, whether you do believe our procurement is as efficient as it can be at the moment, or whether you think there are, in fact, additional savings that could be made in procurement that we aren't currently already making. But in any matter, the scale of what we're talking about I don't believe would come anywhere near to the sort of financial gap that we've currently got. So I'm just wondering what your kind of initial take is on some of the public musings of the people who are behind the administration at this council at the moment. Thank you.
I'll start off with the reorg question. I suppose that the analysis of kind of making the sort of cities more financially viable, I do agree that the consequence of that is you've got to make somewhere less financially viable. I suppose that the only thing that helps to kind of square that circle a little bit is we know through reorganisation there are significant savings available. So it's, obviously kind of the reason we've gone for a single sort of county unitary as a preferred approach is that's the most beneficial one for sort of the county council of Leicestershire and the residents of Leicestershire. So it will entail sharing some of that kind of savings if there is that desire to make the sort of city council more viable. So we do need to be careful, I suppose, with that, and I suppose appreciate what we're going to get ourselves into with any discussions if any do take place. In terms of the other complication with this is this funding reform happening at the same time. So if there is any transfer of boundaries, we actually don't know what that sort of deal would look like in terms of if services are moved across boundary, whether that's sort of into the city or to Rutland or elsewhere. You don't actually know what you're doing. So we're playing a little bit with a blind hand at the moment, which is obviously of concern. And in terms of the mechanisms, you mentioned debt as well. The government's holding a fairly firm line at the moment that they're not going to sort of take on anybody's debt. So it would, I believe, be left to local negotiations to sort of agree how you're going to sort of split this up, which is another factor in that you kind of, if you're going to do reorganisation, ideally you do it as simply as possible, because the more complicated it gets, the more that you bog down in discussions about how you split up historic things instead of actually making sure that kind of the new councils function on day one. So there's kind of, to be honest, there's an awful lot of unknowns on reorganisation. We're just going to have to work through the government feedback, but it's likely we won't know for, even after we've put the submission in, it's going to be waiting for government then to do some consultation before then they may eventually make a decision this time next year. In terms of the procurement one and sort of the Doge unit, obviously we don't have, they've only been in Kent for sort of a few days, I think, so we don't really have any details about actually what they do or don't look into. I would say that kind of the the procured services for the council probably makes up about 70-75% of what we spend. So it's always going to be those external factors a key part of kind of where we look for savings. And it's not necessarily just, I suppose, about the efficiency of the procurement. It could be about what we procure, how we join things up. So it will feature in sort of a future savings plans. How significant it will be, I don't know at this stage, but it's definitely an area we're going to have to look at.
Could I just, while we're in this point, the LGR funding, the government's announced, hasn't it, funding for LLR, and it's going to be split evenly, so it doesn't go matter on population or anything, does it? So how much are we actually going to receive across LLR for the LGR?
Do you mind if we come back to you? Just need to look it up because it's on a mixture of a place and a population basis.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, but I can get back to you with the figure.
And just on that point, it'd be interesting, Mr. Harrison, that while you're here, is your view currently on LGR? What's your preferred? Do you have a preferred option at the moment?
Well, what I can say to you this morning, several things. That we don't think we'll have a visit from the Doge, but that doesn't rule out what we're looking at, serious plans of how we may go forward, and it will perhaps involve an external body assisting us. And I think that will be very appropriate because of the scale of what we've got to recover from what we inherited. Simple as that. So we inherited what we've got. Other people lived with it comfortably for 24 years of administration. So it is a deep concern. And it's most unfortunate the depth and the importance of how it affects this council is very sad, because it has put us in a really very serious position of how we're going forward and how the whole thing operates. Regarding the lookout across the county, well, I'm meeting with the mayor this week to have private discussions, and I wouldn't publicly air things of how we might go with those negotiations, but we will be looking and talking and trying to find ways forward that can be helpful, but are realistic and will be acceptable to the people. It's complicated. You've been there, you know what it's like. I know you've previously thought it was good to go to the city, then not hand them to the city and all sorts. So, but at the end of the day, we are where we are. So we have a situation where we've got to look at finances more than serious. It's massively urgent. We have to address all of this properly and professionally. How we move forward with the construction of Leicestershire is slightly complicated because of the different ingredients, about 9 different bodies all involved. And we recently had somebody concerned with the police, managing the police affairs, is now thrown his hat in the ring and suggesting what should happen. Well, I've wrote back and told him it was most inappropriate and not his part to play involving himself in that. So I shall meet him later this afternoon and hopefully reinforce that to him. So it is difficult, and it's horrible when you go to a meeting and you say, well, I'm talking, but I'm telling you nothing, because it isn't possible yet. There's lots of work got to go in, but as it progresses, clearly you will be made aware of it, and it's as simple as that. Thank you.
So just to clarify, you don't have a preferred view at the moment as the way forward?
Well, to announce anything like that would be fairly precarious because you've had experience yourself of it. We've got to know, is it practical and will it work, and can you carry all the components? If it isn't, well then, you know, we're back to where we were. So hopefully it's got to be time spent putting a plan together with people and trying to do it in a professional way that will stand and it won't fall down at any one time. It's got to be able to stand up straight and say, right, here we are, and let government view it and then calculate, is it what we really want within their guidelines?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Carlton?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's strange to see you sitting on that side of the table. We normally look that way. That reflects recent outcomes, doesn't it? So I've got a number of issues I'd like to work through the report on. The first concerns the serious worsening situation in relation to the high needs block. And the report does explain that that is expected to increase further. Now, we've got this work that we're doing. Never been really clear what this body is that's coming in to help us with the high needs block. But unless you're going to say it would be even worse, they don't appear to have achieved anything yet. We don't actually seem to have got anywhere with trying to bring that down. And as you're predicting, it is going to worsen. Now, I believe there is another level above the one we're in of intervention that the government could get involved. And I wonder what the threshold is in terms of it further deteriorating before that would be considered. Or is it something administration or the council would ask them to come in and do? I can't emphasise how important this is, because this is, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, this is in addition to the 90 odd million that we have on the revenue side, and it's currently being treated kind of off the books for every council. And yet we know, don't we, and it definitely came out during the election, just how dissatisfied parents and users of the SEN service are. There is huge concern. Now, I know the government's bringing forward a green paper and there's further expected changes to SEN, but these are some of the problems that have come up and the issues and just the delays in getting your plan done and then getting your plan reviewed. And you must be familiar with this because it was your portfolio, Madam Chairman. I think this seems to be getting worse rather than better. And it's not, the money's important, but it's not just about the money, it's about the service that is not working correctly at the moment. So, I mean, just looking forward, I would say if there was anything to come out this morning, the scrutiny, the children and families really do need to focus on this high need block and particularly what further support and help. But I'm sure the officers will be able to help us on that. Now, they wanted to move to para 79. Some worrying points in that. It talks about the deteriorating, the challenge in the deteriorating situation. And it says that we will need to take immediate action to identify further deliverable savings. So I'm not clear. Does this mean, you say we'll get another report in September to the Scrutiny Commission and then Cabinet will have to look at that? Are we talking here about further in-year savings? Or are we looking ahead to what might come forward in the next budget and the next MTFS? It's not really clear, but it does say immediate action to identify further deliverable savings. And that really takes me to the point, going back to the budget that we made, and we made as a commission here, as to why is this being done now? Surely this should have been done back in January and February by the previous administration. Have we been putting off some difficult decisions and not pressing ahead with this immediate action that's referred to in paragraph 79? I think we need to understand more here really about what kind of action this is. Now, we know that we've got controls in place, decisions being made at a higher level by officers on terms of replacing posts and recruitment levels of expenditure. Can the officers give us some indication this morning of what this immediate action might be going to look like? And then on paragraph 80, we've referred to local government reorganisation and the modelling, and Councillor King's referred to what came out last week. And it's suggesting here that, it may need more resources in order to do this. Well, this is going to be, if we end up, we know there's going to be 3. The City Council is going to be continuing with theirs. The districts are. We've got the all-county one. Surely we can try and come together and make some suggestions about not doing all this separately in silos. There must be a baseline of preparing the financial information that we need to share. I'm very pleased that the new leader has started to engage with the district leaders, certainly more than previously and more positively. This would be a complete waste of public money if we simply prepare 3. And now we hear, as has been said, that the police commissioner might be trying to get in, and he might be preparing a bid as well. So that would be a 4th one. So could I make a plea that that we do talk to the other councils? The leader says he's meeting the city mayor tomorrow about how we can draw up some kind of protocol about sharing information that needs to be done. Because if we just all do this separately, and are we talking about bringing in consultants to do this? I hope not. I hope we're not going to be spending huge amounts of when we're in such a tight position as we are. So I'll leave it at that, Chairman. I think the 3 things are the high needs block, what's going to be happening in terms of immediate action, and what's going to be the financial cost of this preparing this business case for LGR. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison, did you want to come in before the officers?
Yes. I attended a meeting with the district councillors a couple of weeks back where I assured them that we'd be open with them in all of our information, which quite shook them, and then they were pleased, and then they looked a little uncertain, because at the end of the day, the government itself says there has to be openness of where it all is, and you cannot posture. So we need to see the proper planning, proper funding. How will it work? We will be more than open and honest to put our bid on the table properly for people to look at. But in the same turn, they must equally be as honest themselves, because at the moment, it's all a bit of smoke and mirrors. Nobody really knows. There's good intentions, no doubt, but we need to evaluate, will there be value for the residents of Leicestershire, whatever happens? And that must be the key. Is it value for money? So we need to know. And also, debt's going to be another important thing, because who's partnering who and who's bringing in debt, and what is that level of debt, and how they're going to manage it. So it's a lot more than just let's have an agreement around the table. It sounds a great idea. How on earth are we going to fund it? How is it going to operate, etc.? So exciting times ahead. Thank you.
Just to clarify as well, Mr. Galton, the county didn't use any consultants to put our bid in, but I know the districts did. So just to put that, clarify that.
I'm looking at going forward now, what the government's asked us to do. But could I have a response from the officers on the other 2 points?
Thank you. So just in terms of the first question around high needs, so you're absolutely right that the deficit on the high needs block, both in year and cumulative, is in addition to that MTFS gap of 90 million that I mentioned earlier. We are part of the government's Delivering Better Value programme. And then in terms of the kind of the next level of support, which is a safety valve programme, I don't think there's a sort of a hard and...
Sorry. Sorry, I'm butting in rudely, but safety valve's been killed now, so they've sort of, it's been wound up as a scheme. I think they're hooking everything onto the sort of the reforms of legislation to sort of solve this. It wasn't delivering what they expected.
In terms of the county's own position, so we are delivering savings in high needs, and they are included in the MTFS. So I think we've got just over £50 million worth of savings to achieve, but because of continuing increase in demand, those savings are not sufficient yet to close that gap. We have currently got the statutory override in place, which does allow that deficit to be held off balance sheet. That does at the moment end, or is due to end on the 31st of March 26. So we are awaiting quite urgent clarity from government around the future of that override. But I think the other issue in relation to spend is policy reform as well. And I think even if the statutory override is to continue, that won't solve the underlying kind of root causes of the deficit, and it needs to have that national sort of policy reform to deal with that demand in a different way. But as you said, it does present quite a significant risk to the council, and we're hoping that there might be some further information in the spending review this week on plans to deal with that. And then the second point around was paragraph 79, wasn't it, and the scale of the challenge and sort of urgent action to identify further savings. The 25-26 budget has been set and was set with a very small planned use of reserve. So that urgent action isn't for further in-year savings. And we set a sort of sustainable budget that we're comfortable with. That immediate action is to start to find further savings for 26, 27 and beyond. So the MTFS already includes, I think it's £33 million of savings to achieve over the life of the MTFS. What we need to do, though, is identify further savings to close that gap, with particular attention on 26, 27, which is why we are now looking at making sure we've got all options on the table. We've got a number of savings already under development, but we need to go further, and with potentially some external support to make sure that we are looking everywhere possible and have got all of the options on the table to discuss with Cabinet. But it just give you some assurance, it's not looking for further in-year savings. So we do have a budget set for the year. It is looking forward.
I think I could sit here for 2 hours and explain TISL to you, Simon, and you'd still struggle to get your head around it all. Has TISL ever come to Scrutiny Commission to be scrutinised at all? Or is it just sat with children and families?
It's gone to children and families scrutiny.
Would it be useful, because obviously it is one of our highest risks, that we have a paper come to Scrutiny Commission on the agenda to dig a little bit deeper into TISL and try and explain the complexities of that to the Scrutiny Commission? Would that be useful, do you think? Yeah. Okay, we'll add that to the agenda at some point to bring Declan.
Sorry, it's just on the reorg. I was going to mention the figure that you asked for. So the allocation for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland is £365,888. So then it's left to the count. They'll only allocate it to 3 councils within the area, and it's left locally to decide how that split happens.
So it makes sense to, obviously down to the leader, but to pool it for your working together seems to be the most. Yeah, so we'll add TISL to the programme at some point for us to have a deeper dive in that. And just picking up about this statutory override, are you expecting to hear anything on Wednesday about that? Is that likely to be, do you think, or are we still going to be none the wiser?
Don't think we know. I think we would hope that there will be some confirmation, or at least some direction of travel given this week, but we haven't heard either way. I don't think there's been any information on that recently at all.
It's normally the odd rumour, and there's been nothing at all on it, which doesn't fill you with faith. It'd be interesting if the Chancellor does put a big lump of cash aside for this, because in theory that's where you do it in the spending review, but I'd be surprised if that's what happens.
We're certainly not unique in Leicestershire, and we're certainly not in the high band of debt, so we're certainly not up there with some of the others that have got it. And I think just to, obviously it will come here as a paper, but just you could throw as much money in it and you wouldn't change the issue, because it's funding, it's the reforms of how the service operates that's the problem, not the amount of funding we get. So it's how we have to operate under what statutory legislation is the issue, not, which is what we've been campaigning for years to get. And we are part of the programme as well, so we have got funding from government to look at this as well. So we are piloting some of the schemes that the government doing for the reforms of that. So okay, but have paper here, that'd be more useful for us, I think. Dr. Bloxham, I've got you next.
So yeah, thanks, Mr. Keegan, Declan, for the extra briefing note on the bank risk share proposal. It was really good to see the extra risks and things that are now outlined. I've got a few questions. The rate of return that's been targeted is 13%, which just seems very high. I know we briefly discussed this on Friday. I've had a look in the UK, and UK rates for small business lending, whether it's a bank or slightly more if it's sort of factoring, that kind of thing, sort of LIBOR plus 3%. So the equivalent in Europe, their base rates are much lower than ours. So theirs would be about 5-6%. We would be 8%. So to get 13%, it seems like the only way to do that would be to either have much riskier lending or for it to be quite highly leveraged. And the risk thing talks about leverage, and it talks about it in 2 ways, but it doesn't say what the rate of leverage is, and that seems quite key for determining how risky it is. It also says in the briefing note that the 13% is higher than previous targets, and it says the reason for this is due to the higher interest rate environment that is expected to continue. But European interest rates have been falling the last couple of years. The European base rate has gone from 4% to 2% this month, 4% in 2023 to 2% at the moment. So interest rates are actually falling in Europe. So I don't really see how it can now get a bigger return if interest rates are falling, again, unless it's quite highly leveraged. So they're the main questions. And then more of a broader one. I don't want to sound too negative on this because I think diversifying the portfolio is a good thing from all these property funds. But it still seems like it's not a very diversified portfolio. We've got 4 property funds. One of them's just lost £2 million in capital. It doesn't seem like it's doing that well. And I wonder if having more diversity, things like shares, but in smaller pots, would be a better approach than having a huge amount in property and then some other massive pots in infrastructure and European lending might be good. So whether we could look at that as a future agenda thing, look at the whole portfolio, maybe.
It's already scrutinised under other committees, isn't it? Under the LEAP already. So the lead member for Finance and Resources will be dealing with that, won't they?
So we tend to have 2 layers on sort of investing in Leicestershire piece. As the chair's just sort of pointed out, we've got a call it the ILT board, which is a subcommittee of cabinet who sort of looks in prior to this, because obviously a lot of it's kind of making decisions on investment or divesting things. But what we do is come to this committee report, and we can start to pick up some of those elements. And if there are specific areas, and I suppose it's just worth pointing out on this bank risk share, we first invested in this a few years ago, and the first time we did it, we did a much more extensive presentation on it just to try and get the committee sort of up to speed and familiar with what it is before we went ahead. So again, we thought on that sort of theme, if there are specific areas the committee wants to get into, we can have a look at these either in sort of a public or private session just to get yourselves comfortable with them. In terms of the bank risk share and some of your questions, I suppose that the important thing to know is this isn't lending itself. So although it's an enabler for banks to lend, it's the way they make the money isn't through sort of directly loaning. It's more of writing insurance, and that's why you can get kind of returns that are different to what you did. Maybe sort of analogy you look at in terms of interest rates. So there is a link, as you've pointed out, with sort of like as the rates go up, that does sort of create a sort of a link in there, and that's sort of something they've got in their pricing. But it's when the original sort of investments we were making, where we were talking about 8 to 10%, base rates were only about sort of 1%, hovering around there. So it's still sort of markedly higher than what it was. In terms of the leverage, it tends to be sort of fairly small. It's a figure we can find out for you in terms of that, because you're absolutely right. It has got a tendency to kind of boost the returns, but also on the downside, it can sort of create that sort of, you can actually sort of enter in a position where you actually kind of, in a very extreme case, you don't just sort of lose the money you've put in, but you can actually lose additional money. So that's why it's a real key measure to do. But it is pretty limited in this product, as it were. It's not something that they need to do. They often do it around I don't know, sort of what you tend to have is they don't like to take the client's money too early and then it not be deployed straight away, because that goes against their target return. So what you often see with these sort of products is they'll borrow it early in the sort of the investment cycle, so that then they can hold the kind of client's money back, and then the performance is just based on day one of the client's money, although they've started the activity before. So it tends to be more of that. There's more of that kind of nature of things, but I can certainly find out the sort of figure of leverage for this fund. Does that pick up all the questions? Sorry, I scribbled down some.
Anything else you want to add to that, Dr. Foxham?
I mean, that kind of does. I mean, obviously, I'd like to see the leverage figures. It's just mainly that it just seems like for something so bespoke and so niche, European small business lending to make up 20% of our portfolio, and then the rest of it's mostly in property funds, which have done pretty badly. It just doesn't seem like a great approach. But if it's being looked at elsewhere, brilliant.
But the other point I should mention, you talked about sort of like the diversification. It's just worth noting the sort of thousands and thousands of individual sort of schemes below this. So we don't, because we're not doing sort of the individual kind of decision making, we're appointing a manager to do it. So that's where it sort of brings in an awful lot of the diversification. And it is purely on, I suppose, the other context as well as this is only as part of the investing in Leicestershire program. So we've got we'll put 10 to 20 million in this. So it'll be about 10% of that fund, but we've also got £400 million of cash. And that's all on the very, very low risk side of things. So it's that balance on the overall sort of scheme of things as well.
But that being said, then why don't we invest in shares? Why don't we have some more diversification in North America or the Far East and spread it out even more so we get some negative correlation with these things?
problem with shares is it's so highly correlated. It's kind of with this sort of the economic performance, and it's highly correlated with sort of property. So this is, although the returns tend to be sort of higher on this, the risk profile has been lower. We haven't seen the volatility in this. So with sort of shares, it's very easy to sort of erode into your capital. The stress testing done on this bank risk share, you'd have to have something in excess of the financial crisis to actually erode your capital. So although they're in the balance between the risk, which is lower than shares, but the returns, which are often higher than sort of a blended bucket of shares, it's tends to have worked for us in the past. But yeah, shares we've always steered clear of. Some authorities have. We've always steered clear of it just because of that volatility where you can lose 20% overnight. We've never seen that sort of loss on this scheme.
That the new administration can also look at what risk they put across the money that the councils hold. We've always been fairly prudent, but took us a bit more risky in the last year or so. But we need to remember it's public money and not your own money that you're playing with. So we just need to be really careful. Obviously, the lead member for resources can also look at that along with the leader. Mr. Harrison, can I just ask your view on this bank risk share investment? Are you content with the direction the council's taking currently?
Oh, I'm in discussions with Declan. We're just going to sort of sit down very carefully. There's no rash decisions. As you've outlined, clearly it's not our money, it's the people's money. We have to be very, very careful how we deal with it. I think that's as much as I can say at this stage.
Thank you. Mr. Poland, you were next on my list.
Thank you very much. Paragraph 83 of the report, the current MTFS still shows a gap of £90 million by 2028-29. And I know, obviously, the MTFS includes a 2.5% sort of predicted council tax increase year on year. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. And as well as unspecified service cuts in that time, things to be found between now and then, and despite that it's still £90 million deficit. Do you think it's possible to remove that deficit or significantly take away from it without council tax increases and service cuts? And if you don't believe that's possible, have you forecasted what our deficit would be if in fact we didn't have service cuts and we froze council tax? That's the first question. Second question, to the leader, if possible. You mentioned that Doge are not coming to audit us. Can I just ask why that is, please?
So Harrison, do you want to answer that question? Then we go to officers.
We're looking at other thoughts and organisations which would be more preferable to me as using the other system, because when we do this, it has to be on a basis, can we recover and take away that debt that we're facing? It's going to be an incumbent. So we have to have a proper thought out scheme with a reliable partner who is able to accomplish that for us, and not just come in and bang a big drum and save a few million here and there. We have a specific problem. We've got to try and concentrate our thoughts on how we can deal with it correctly and professionally. But clearly, we will need outside help to accomplish this.
Is that going to come at a cost, Mr. Harrison? Because obviously the Doge is free, isn't it? As far as I'm aware, they're not charging councils for that. So if you don't do the Doge system from Reform UK and you bring in your own consultants, would that be a cost to that?
Inevitably, there will be a cost. Outside sources of the style and standard and professionalism needed, there would be a cost.
Okay, so you're talking about bringing in consultants to do that, is that what you're saying?
Ultimately, yes.
And do you have a timescale for this?
Well, not that's going to incumbent anything, because we have to be careful. I put a timescale on it. We're then scrambling around to a timescale. If we've made it, why make it? So it is being dealt with reasonable haste, but we have to be careful of what we're doing and how we're doing it, because we've got to be able to secure enough recovery, not only to wipe out that fee or whatever it is, and the fee being significant to what the result would be. So we have to be sensible and just go at a pace. And so that's where we are. So it is very serious, and we inherited a really, really bad hand. But, you know, that's what happens, and we're now got to deal with it, and we are.
I think I'll dispute you're being dealt with a really bad hand. I think we're a very good, efficient run authority. So I think I'd disagree with that comment there. But are you talking about 6 months, a year? I mean, you obviously feel this is very, very important. So you must be having some sort of timescale in your head about when you're likely to get this to be able to save all the millions of pounds that you're expecting to save. So when it's in your head about when you think this might happen?
Well, when we know, I will let you know. It's as simple as that.
So I take you don't know.
I do know.
Thanks very
I'm
much.
not prepared to
so
say.
to answer Mr. Harrison's question now.
So just in terms of council tax, so the current MTFS does assume 2.99% increase in council tax in future years. Difficulty is we don't yet know what government policy on council tax referendum limits will be for 26, 27 and beyond. So we've made some assumptions, but again, unlikely to know what the government policy on that will be until probably closer to Christmas, or at least autumn. Every 1% of council tax increase is about £4 million for the council. So if we were to look at a council tax freeze, for instance, as you've suggested, removing that 2.99% from the MTFS would give us an additional gap of about £12 million a year. So over the life of the MTFS, you're probably looking at close to £40 million of additional savings that we need to find on top of the 90 million gap that I've already mentioned. So I think that's why it's important at this stage that in terms of closing that gap, we are looking at all options around income generation and savings, and then understanding the impact on service delivery of those. And I guess the other difficulty there is the level of statutory responsibilities that we also have in the budget, and particularly around social care, and having to just bear in mind that the council still does need to deliver a certain level of service, particularly for those statutory services.
Do you want to come back, Mr. Pound?
Yes, thank you very much. That's very clear on the council tax. So thank you very much for that. In terms of the service cut side of things, obviously the MTFS at the moment incorporates unspecified service cuts to be worked out, I believe I'm right saying. So the 90 million isn't based on the services exactly as they are today, or is it?
So the MTFS incorporates just over £30 million worth of savings that need to be delivered already, just to get to that position that we've talked about earlier. They are already quite clearly defined though. So those, I think it's £33 million of savings are set out in the MTFS, and you can see exactly kind of the services that we are aiming to change to achieve those savings. What there then is a number of other savings that we're still exploring that don't appear in the MTFS yet. There is reference to them at a very high level, but we haven't yet built in the implications of those savings yet, because we haven't got enough information about what the level of savings is likely to be, how quickly we might be able to achieve it, or what the implications are. So there's a number of savings that are built into the MTFS, and we need to deliver just to stand still almost. And then there are a range of other savings that we're looking at, but we've not yet built in because we haven't got kind of sufficient assurance yet.
Thank you again for that. Do we know the value of the savings that are built in at the moment?
So over the full MTFS period, current period, there is, I think, £33 million of general fund revenue savings to deliver, and there is then, I think it's just over 50 million of high need savings as well. So that is on top.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Piper. You were next. I'll come back to you, James.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to this, the bank risk share portfolio, if it's lending money to small, medium and business companies, is that not increased risk, considering the current government and its attitude towards businesses, for example, like putting up the business employees' national insurance?
It doesn't lend directly to the businesses, it just it ensures the bank's potential losses to those businesses. The reason that they like small businesses is that, unlike big businesses, that although the level of losses is higher, it's more predictable. So that tends to be how they can price the insurance more accurately, and so it's basically think more of an insurance product rather than a lending product, and that's And it's that ability to price, and price predictably is what makes this product successful. It's pan-European as well, so there's very little in the UK itself.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you're insuring loans, and the loans are potentially more risky, then surely the insurance is likely to pay out more and therefore be less profitable.
But if you know the level of risk in advance, you price in that risk. So as long as what you worry about with sort of small businesses, everything runs along at a really, really good level, and then it spikes like crazy, and you don't know when that spike's going to happen. Whereas small businesses tend to be, often because they're owner managed and there's sort of a lot more kind of personal investment in those businesses, they'll hang on to them sort of through the tough times a lot more, as much as they do in the good times, if that makes sense. So it's that predictability of losses that tends to run at a very consistent basis year after year after year, rather than dipping and spiking with the economic climate.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask the lead member, but unfortunately she's not here, so probably falls back to you, Leader. Wasn't so long ago that you said on Radio Leicester at the hustings that you praised the former administration for their diligence in saving money, and that the council was, I think I quote, really well run. And yet you've just sat here this morning, you've said the mess that we inherited. Now, obviously colleagues around the table will probably question that, because we are the most efficient county council upper tier authority in England. We have made massive savings in the last few years, and yet your party stood on a election promise of no tax rises, which severely ties your hands together come next year's budget. And you've just said this morning that you're looking to appoint an external body to audit. Now, Mrs. Taylor and I, obviously, we dealt with an external body a couple of years ago called Newton Europe. And whilst they've made massive savings, they did cost tens of millions of pounds to do that. So with no tax raises, you're going back on what you're saying, whether we were efficient or not. You seem to think we're not anymore. Just wonder if you could expand on that, please. Thank you.
Delighted to do so. That was during a comment. It was fair appraisal. It was a public meeting, a hustings. It was Leicester Radio. But then it was deployed as a main political thing. It was used by the Conservatives then during the election. I was just being perfectly honest. What they had done is look very good at the front line, but not manage the budget. Some of those were fantastic. The efficiency, there's nobody can deny it. But we have this massive debt. So somewhere something went wrong. So, you can only have it which way do you want it? They were efficient at what they did, but ultimately they still have this debt there. So, how do you rate it? At the end of the day, this is where we are. I was being honest, as always, because I want to be honest. I like to win knowing we're honest and not trying to delude the electorate, as my words were used as a political tool during the election, as with other stuff. So I'm not too worried about that. I know what we believe in. I know what we've got to do. There is an inherent debt that we've now got to face, and it is causing a lot of concern and worry how we're going to deal with it. So what the questioner doesn't understand is that it's efficiency all the way through the business that's important. We all have wins in business. You can say, look, what we've done there is fantastic. But then if there's a hole somewhere else, you've got to make sure you're dealing with that. So as much as you can sort of tiptoe around to make political shots, here we are. There's been success, but now we have massive concern that's got to be dealt with. So it's as simple as that, and being honest.
Can I just clarify, you're talking about debt? You're talking about debt, or you're talking about future budget gaps?
Future budget debt.
So it's not debt you're talking about, it's
not.
So you haven't inherited debt, you've inherited budget gaps for later years, which we all knew about anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I was just going to come back on something very, very similar, because obviously I don't know if the leader understands that it's not the debt, it's the future budget, but that is dictated by the demanding growth. And that's something that we as a council can't change because we have statutory services that we have to provide, and that demand is growing year upon year. And no amount of savings is going to stem that, not unless government give us lots and lots of money, and they've been very unwilling to do that so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Okay, so I'd like to thank Mr. Harrison for his illumination, the fact that we're not going to have a visit from his friends in the Doge team, but instead he's going to the council's going to commission yet more consultants to support the hard-pressed finance team to come up. But I'm slightly concerned by your lack of urgency about this. When my colleague asked you, you wouldn't give a timeline on this, when very clear that we, if we're going to find savings, which and efficiencies, whatever they are, we need to crack on with it. And I just make the point that actually a few months ago you voted for the budget that's, we're talking about the outturn from, and even last year's budget, you voted for that as well when you were in a different group. So, and I don't recall you, well, you may have raised some concerns, as I did and many others did, but unfortunately, identifying efficiencies without impacting on frontline services is incredibly difficult to do, given that there are statutory obligations and statutory undertakings that we have to deliver, whether we want to or not. We have to do those things. We have to look after disabled people. We have to look after people who need care, who've got care needs. We have to, special educational needs has got to be delivered. And there are challenges that we face, and we all know about those, because unfortunately we're not a very well funded authority by the central distribution of taxation. We're in the bottom 2 or 3. In the bottom 1, I believe, for England, depending on how you work it out. And the consequences of that approach by central government over the last 25 years or more, so that covers all flavours of national government, coalition, Conservatives, Labour, is that's why we are where we are, because we just haven't had enough funding through the distribution mechanism that the government uses, the MHCLG uses. Now, the concern, as was articulated earlier by, I think, Simone, was that actually the reform to government funding could actually see us, bizarrely enough, actually even worse off than we already are, because by the measures that the government uses to look at deprivation, Leicestershire, whatever we may think about it, Leicestershire is not classed as a particularly high deprivation council area. It just isn't. And unfortunately, what that means is we are, given the government's current financial constraints that they've brought themselves into, that means they're going to be looking for more savings from spending departments. And MHCLG, I've no doubt, will be offering up yet more cuts to council budgets. We are going to be on the short end of that, I've no doubt. So it is deeply concerning, and I do think all of us are going to have to work together to find these efficiencies and savings. And it is, of course, we've got the politics as well, but at the end of the day, we've got to have to find how we do more for less, basically, and we've been doing that for a long time. Unfortunately, it's now the ball's in your court and your reform colleagues to come up with the ideas and potential solutions. Obviously, we will help scrutinise those and provide positive feedback on some of those things in the future, as we have done in the past. Thank you, Chair. That's what I wanted to say. Sorry, I know it's more of a speech.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't really pick up a question there.
But the question really is, isn't there a degree of urgency for the leader to kind of, get on appointing consultants? He did say earlier that he didn't want to do anything quickly. Well, we're already into June. The budget's got to be, first cut of the budget's required by like September. So you ain't got very long to get on with this. Otherwise, there won't be time to do.
Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Harrison?
We are taking it very, very serious, and we're working at pace. And through your own past experience, has to be done at a special way of doing things. We're actually doing it. I am concentrating very, very much on that particular aspect. So it's not something that we'll think about next week. I talk about it daily virtually with Declan and the chief. So it is in hand, but I don't want barriers and time limits, but we're moving at pace. And when we've got something we can say, well, then obviously you'll know about it straight away. So it is serious. We're getting on with it, and we're not just sitting around and talking about it. We are working at it. And as soon as we have a result or a part of the progress that we can now say, right, we can now inform people of this, we will.
So has a tender gone out yet for consultations to support you on this? Have you put a tender out yet?
We're in the process. We're in the process now of doing that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Pollen, I've got you to come back to.
Thank you. Just to continue my questions from before. So we've said the 90 million budget deficit by 2028-29. We've said £40 million or thereabouts would be the cost of freezing council tax over that period of time as well. So 130 million if we froze council tax by 2028-29. And you also said, again, just to summarise, the general revenue and high need savings together say come to circa £83 million. So if my maths is right, are we talking about a budget deficit by 2028-29 of £213 million if we froze council tax and didn't cut any services? And if that is right, does that mean we'd have to find that amount of money in efficiency savings by that time?
Just to be clear, though, those savings in the MTFS, very few of them are cuts. These are the sort of the identified kind of published savings. Now, it's a little bit of beauty in the eye of the beholder, because one person's cut could be another person's efficiency saving. But your numbers are right in terms of if we sat here now and sat on our hands and said we're not going to do anything else, there'll be a handful of those savings will already been delivered. But on the rump of it, you're right. There's a significant budget gap. If you froze council tax, it'd make the savings work. It'd make the position worse. And if we didn't deliver any more savings, it'd make that position even worse again.
Okay. Any more questions from anybody on this item? Okay, just one from me, I think. Probably a couple actually. The adult social care, so obviously they've delivered a great underspend through their fair access panel that they've been working on for a few years now, and that's come to fruition. And I see within the budgets that you've reduced the funding that they're going to get now from the main budget. Do you think that's sustainable going forward where we are with adults?
Adults is a demand-led service, and you can see from some of the charts included in the report actually that there is fluctuations in demand. But I think those fair outcome panels have had some really good results by managing demand but still providing need, but providing it in a different way. And inflation is the other key factor actually for adult social care, because it does impact on the rates that we pay. So I think there is a lot of complexity in how we have to forecast adult social care demand going forward, which is why we have got growth forecasts in the MTFS, and we have got some sort of sensitivity around that and some different options. But it is the area that we will need to keep a very close eye on as we start the MTF refresh process again, just because it is demand led and it can fluctuate.
Though inflation going up, things like that could have a real impact on what we forecast. But obviously the budget for 25-26 is a balanced budget that we've got so far, with all that, with some contingencies in case we have some of those little bumps in the road going forward.
So at the 25-26 budget does make some assumptions about adult social care growth in the future. So as things stand, it is based on those sort of robust assumptions about demand, but obviously it is subject to change.
And my final question, I saw in there that the debt had come down quite a bit for what you were forecasting to what we finished the year ending of 175 million. Is that all internal or external? Is there a mix in there? Are you able to give me a breakdown of that debt?
So that we have repaid some debt during the year just because it made sense with the way the interest rates were. In terms of the actual split of external and internal debt in terms of the way that we internally borrow for the programme, I don't have that right to hand, but we can provide that afterwards if that would be.
I think it'd be useful to understand what's external and what's internal borrowing.
that 175 is all external. We do have I can't remember which way it's fallen, but because we've been paying off, the difference between internal and external borrowing is pretty small at the moment. So 175 is the rump of it.
Okay, I've got no more questions. Anything from anyone else before I bring this to an end? Okay, Mr. Harrison, is there anything you want to finish up before I draw this item to an end?
No, other to say that I'm pleased to be in here. It is important, and as soon as we're making progress, you'll certainly know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendations is we're asked to review and comment on the report and agree any recommendations for the Cabinet to consider at its meeting on the 17th of June. The comments now have been recorded by Joe and recorded in the minutes, and they will be passed to consideration to the Cabinet for consideration. Everyone happy with that? Okay, that's agreed. Thank you. Okay, on to item 11, the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report 2024-25. So this annual report is backward looking and outlines, thank you, Declan and Sylvain. It outlines the key work undertaken over the last 12 months by the Commission and the 5 other standing Overview and Scrutiny Committees. The previous Commissioners and Chair and spokes of all Scrutiny Committees commented on the report now attached. As usual, the report will be submitted to the full Council for its meeting in July. I will now hand over to Michael as the previous Chair of Scrutiny Commission to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for electing me Vice Chairman. It's appreciated. The report we have here is a very, I think, accessible and readable report into the work of the main scrutiny commissions over the last year, and I put on the record my appreciation of the work of all the officers who've put together this report. Looking through the report, it sets out the work that this commission and the other 5 commissions have done over the last year. There's been 34 meetings, 124 reports have been considered. There's been 25 submissions to Cabinet from the commissions and 53 recommendations made and additional information and assurances sought from those meetings. So I think that they've played an important part over the last year in holding the council to account and also in getting information on the issues that affect residents in the county. We've looked at all the sort of major issues, whether it was local government reorganisation, whether it's been the regular, as we've seen today, the regular monitoring of the financial situation, looking at the experience of Leicestershire residents, the customers of the county council and their feedback on the services and communications that they receive from the county. So hopefully people have found it an informative report. I'd also like to put on record my appreciation for the work of Mrs. Page, who was the outgoing Vice Chair of this committee, and Mr. Bannister and Mr. Hunt for their work as scrutiny commissioners as well. So I present the report and hopefully people can support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, I'll just put on record my thanks for all the hard work that you've done as scrutiny chair as well. Really good report to read through, and I look forward to it going to full council as well. Is there any questions or comments on this report from members? Okay, so we'll agree that this will go to full council meeting in July. And that's all agreed. Thank you. Okay, item 12, the next meeting, the Commission is scheduled to take place on Monday the 8th of September at 10 AM. And item 13, as I stated previously, there was no urgent item, so I declare that the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much for your attendance.